government.
This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili Gata. Thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalohungva. Here are the headlines for Tuesday, November 10th. The Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, is back in the Supreme Court. Today's case is the third time it's come before the nation's highest court, and the decision could impact every single Native who uses Indian health services or contract health. That's because funding for the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act is tied up in the ACA. New Mexico Senator Tom Udall says the ACA is not perfect, but it's saved lives. In a statement, Udall said the ACA permanently reauthorized the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act and expanded access to health care for Native Americans through marketplace exchanges, Medicaid expansion, and increased revenue for the Indian Health Service. At the heart of this case, California versus Texas, is the penalty tax for not having health insurance, which was removed from the health law by Congress in 2017. If the plaintiffs have standing to sue, experts say the ruling could have little to no impact. However, Republicans argue removing the penalty renders the whole law unconstitutional, and a ruling in their favor would put Indian health programs at risk. New Zealand's Prime Minister and Cabinet are sworn into office amid Maori culture. Nanaia Mahuta, the newly appointed foreign minister, led the group with the Maori chant as they arrived for the swearing-in ceremony. Mahuta is Maori and took her oath of office in her traditional language this past Friday. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern warned her new cabinet that they are taking office during a difficult time due to the global pandemic. She added they will be a government for all New Zealanders because they must. Ardern's Liberal Labour Party won re-election in a landslide victory last month. She has assigned a number of Indigenous Maori lawmakers to top positions. Besides Mahuta, she appointed Kelvin Davis, Minister for Children. And with the number of COVID-19 cases rising in Arizona, the Hopi tribe is reinstating a stay-at-home executive order. On November 4th, the tribe saw 24 new cases in a 2-week period. This follows the rise in cases across the state. The tribe also followed the recommendations from its own Incident Management Authority and the Indian Health Service to make this order. All non-essential businesses will be closed. Any visitors or tourists who the tribe said would normally be welcomed are now being told to leave immediately in the safest way possible. Hopi Chairman Timothy Navanyoma says the order will stay in effect until there is a downward trajectory in cases over a 14-day period. The tribe had been in the process of a Phase 1 reopening. Canada's federal government is investing more than $1 million for the creation of an Indigenous protected area in the Canadian Arctic. The Arcvillate Indigenous Protected and Conserved Area covers a chain of 24 islands in the northeastern part of Hudson Bay. It will be managed by the Inuit community of Inukjuk. This conservation supports the Inuits' cultural land connection and protects habitats for species like the polar bear. The town manager of Inukjuk says that protecting the habitat for polar bears is the same as protecting the bears forever. A federal environmental minister added the project will help conserve Canada's iconic biodiversity and landscapes as well as fight climate change. The Kuruk tribe of California is joining with other organizations to lay out how traditional fire prevention techniques can protect their homelands. Recently, wildfires raged through their homelands, destroying 200 homes and displacing 1,000 people. The Slater fire is an example of catastrophic wildfires flaring up after decades of ignoring Kuruk forest management techniques. Kuruk descendant and U.S. Forest Service ecologist Frank Lake says that combining Western and Indigenous fire science will benefit both the tribe and the public. The Kuruk say their prescribed fires stimulate production of traditional foods and cultural materials. It also removed plants that acted as fuel for forest fires. Partners include the Kuruk tribe, Oregon State University, the University of Washington, and the U.S. Forest Service. Native American remains are being excavated in a residential neighborhood outside of Los Angeles. Recently, city workers were digging beneath a sidewalk when they discovered a human skeleton, according to the Los Angeles Times. Forensic investigators determined the bones were at least 100 years old and likely Native American. Just 2 miles away from that site, a month earlier, construction crews found more ancient Native American remains. They believe both people were most likely members of the Gabriel-Lino Tongva tribe. The Orange County coroner notified the Native American Heritage Commission as required by law. Tongva tribal officials say if they had it their way, ancestors would not be unearthed and disturbed. The tribe is working on finding a final resting place for the burial ceremonies. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today for Tuesday, November 10th. I'm Patty Thalahungva. We'll be right back.
This is Indian Country Today.
With November being Native American Heritage Month, there are many virtual events going on all month long, and one is an all-women, all-Indigenous film festival. It's part of the First Peoples Fund's Rolling Res Arts Native Women in Film. Missy Whiteman is Northern Arapaho and Kickapoo, and she is a writer, director, and producer, and her work has received Emmy nominations. The trailer for her film, Coyote Way X, Charlie's Virtual Bike Ride, will be seen in this film festival. Welcome, Missy.
Thank you for having me, Patty. It's an honor and a pleasure to be on here with you today.
Well, we're very happy to have you, and you know, that title, it's quite a title. How does it tie into the story that you tell?
Well, Charlie's Bike Ride, Virtual Bike Ride, is actually a trailer for a 360 video of the same experience. One of the things about the Coyote Way Going Back Home project that I'm working on currently is that it's a trilogy. So this is the second installment of a 3-part trilogy. The first is a short film called The Coyote Way Going Back Home, and it's a short sci-fi docu-narrative. It's a sci-fi film about a young boy named Charlie who has to make a decision whether or not he wants to join a gang or go on an epic pilgrimage. It was filmed in the Twin Cities at Little Earth United Tribes Housing Projects, which is the only one in the US. And that was actually founded by the American Indian movement, and who you like to say, Uncle Clyde, Clyde Belcourt. So the premise of the story and moving forward with this project is really bringing it into a different realm, because, you know, with trickster stories, with coyote stories, it's never just one narrative. It's always something that loops into another story. And especially right now, this time, 360 is really not quite viewed as like a narrative form of technology or even like filmmaking realm. But, you know, for us, it's really looking at an environment and immersing people in this environment and following the story of a young boy while he's a teenager now, and just really looking at what is it like to be an urban native and what is it like to be a young person, especially today. And it's something that, you know, is really exciting for us, you know, moving into expanded cinema and more, less about theater, but making filmmaking accessible to other people, you know, like not only at home, you know, with COVID, but also, you know, possibly outside, outdoors with performance, and just including anyone and everyone who wants to engage.
Well, so what are some of the adventures he gets into on his journey?
Well, in the journey that we filmed at this sector, it's really about him being immersed in the environment of Little Earth United Tribes and introducing different characters that are also in the film. And it's also passing on that responsibility as being a trickster. So we have like an older trickster in the film who was played by my dad, and he passes that knowledge on to Charlie. And so that's really like passing on traditions and passing on that responsibility. And how do we move that forward?
And that's kind of a theme with your work too, looking at mentors. So who mentored you, and now today, who are you mentoring?
So today I'm mentoring many, many young people on my reservation. Over the past, I want to say 8 years, we have been building a youth media program as well as a youth media production company with the White Buffalo Recovery Center and Sunny Goggles. And some of the work that we've done with them is really like producing short videos for the tribe. They're also looking into eventually 360, but right now they're doing drone virtual, how do I want to say it? They're doing drone virtual field trips. And that's something that, right, a lot of people can't really do right now because of school not being there. So it's really, how do we make this accessible to young people? Because, you know, for me, growing up, there wasn't a lot of mentors. There weren't a lot of filmmakers who were Native. Or even for me, how do I get into film? So really, my dad was my main mentor. He was the person that taught me to see with an artist's eye, with the vision, and to also like incorporate a lot of our teachings, a lot of our lessons into our work. And then also, like, we talk about our ancestors and the messages that they have. And then we talk about like the spirit world, and we talk about creator. And in that way, we're also replicating and honoring, you know, that process of creation. And then we send that message, you know, to, you know, the people or whoever, you know, it touches. And then we also think about like, how do we carry that onto the future? And that's why youth media and working with young people is so important, because, you know, we say we want to change media. We say we want to change how we produce, especially for women and Indigenous women, but we have to begin with the future generations and the young people in order to do that.
Absolutely, helping them develop the skills, because I think there's a lot of talent out there, but how do you harness that, and how do you help shape them so that they can tell these stories, you know, using all this technology, and now it's so readily available. Even your smartphone is your entire studio in your hands. So there's a lot of power there, and there's a lot of opportunity to tell our stories. Now, some of your films have touched on traditional practices and perspectives, and you also tackle subjects like historical genocide and loss of culture and language. And so talk a little bit about that, and how you are looking to change that narrative when it comes to this newer generation.
One of the most important things with film and media is that it has a power to really change who we are and how we're perceived in mainstream media, but it also has the power and ability for young people to access, their cell phones, like you said earlier, with their smartphones. They have pocket drones now. There's 360 cameras that are like under $200 that are, 4K. There's editing software that's available that's extremely inexpensive, if not free. They can even edit on their phones. And so with that, they have the tools, and what we need to do is to bring in the content, which would be language, which would also be our stories and our way that we tell stories. And, I look at like TikTok, and that's really like that's an extremely like powerful tool right now for young Indigenous people, because you see people sharing their language, sharing their culture, and being really proud of themselves, and just being who they're meant to be. And so with loss of culture, loss of identity, we're actually rebuilding our culture, but using that using media and using film to do that.
Well, you bring up TikTok, and I'm just smiling because there's even more newer apps that are out there, and honestly, it's sometimes hard to keep track of all the new apps that are available. But the young generation, again, they're just absorbing this new technology and running with it. And so that's kind of exciting to see, what they're doing and how they're telling their stories with social media. And there's got to be a fair amount of good humor, because that's one thing that ties Indian people together, is that sense of humor. So tell us some of your jokes, or tell us some of your humorous side to your stories.
Oh my gosh, you're putting me on this spot. I thought you wanted me to tell a joke.
You can tell your best Indian joke too.
I can, but it might not be like appropriate for Indian country today. Got plenty of anti-jokes. Yeah, I mean, laughing is like so healing. Humor is so healing. I mean, even in like the darkest times, we can always find humor. We can always find laughter, and that's something that I think mainstream media and culture just doesn't have. It's like, I can just think about like, when we're on set, when we're working, especially with young people, And it's like, we're serious filmmakers here. And then young people are like, let's just like have fun with this and let's just see where this goes. And I think for me, like in my work, especially with humor, like I think about my earliest film that I produced, which is called Coyote Eats Chocolate. And that's based on a traditional trickster story where Coyote eats a bulb off of a tree. Like he actually eats all of the bulbs, and he ends up having number two like really bad and climbing up a tree and falling in it. And that story for me growing up was like the best story ever. I mean, well, who doesn't love that kind of story where it's either farting or the other thing, the number two. So my dad was actually in that film, and he told me that story growing up. And so I wanted to put him in that film because, that was my favorite story. He's my favorite artist. And for him, it was fun. Like it was just like sitting there telling me a story. So I think we need to include humor in everything that we do, especially if it's something really heavy, because there's so many different sides to the world today, especially, the humor in the world that we find today. We're in contrary times. I mean, we really are. We're in that upside down world now. And everything that we see, we're like, this is not like our traditional way of life. This isn't how we live. Everything is backwards. But it's because we're supposed to do, what the rest of the world isn't doing. We do the opposite. So at least that's what I understand. And that was, something that my dad taught me is you always laugh. You laugh, you do the opposite. You make someone happy if they're sad. Everything is good.
Wow. And that's a really a nice, way to look at things, especially when we're in the middle of this pandemic and we probably don't see a way out for the next 6 months to a year. So really understanding how this dark time will pass, and it's just how we behave in this time that will get us through to the end. Tell us how can we watch your film on this film festival?
So our actual film festival, if you go to First People's Fund, either to their Instagram, their Facebook, they will have a link to the Zoom meetings, and jump online, register, and then you'll get to see there's some amazing filmmakers that I'm really excited to be a part of and just to watch, and amazing stories. So that's the best way, First People's Fund and Zoom link. All
right. And did you come up with an Indian joke?
Oh man. I'll have to find one next time. Next time I will. I would say something about like aunties, but I don't know. Yeah.
Aunties are always good. Aunties are always good too. Yeah. Well, Missy Whiteman, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And when we come back, we'll check in on the annual conference of the National Congress of American Indians, which of course is virtual this year.
This is Indian Country Today.
From election 2020 to the business of Indian country, our reporter Colby Kicking Woman is busy covering stories on so many angles, and he joins us now with an update on a few news items. Hi, Colby.
Hi, Patty. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Well, right now you're working on a story with the National Congress of American Indians, which, like so many other conventions, is turning to the virtual world this year to hold its annual meeting. How is it going so far?
It seems to be going well. I'm sure you've been to the annual convention in the past. It's usually pretty robust, with tribal leaders from across the country convening and able to see each other for the first time or the couple times they do throughout the year, and catch up and conduct business. With everything that goes virtual, there were a few hiccups technically to start, but it seemed to power through. And the big news of the morning was in his opening remarks, Kevin Allis, the chief executive officer of the organization, announced his resignation. Although it's not immediate, he said he will be transitioning out in the next couple months.
And did he give a reason why he's leaving the organization? He's been there for just a little more than a year now, right?
Yeah, so he came in June 2019, so it's about a year and a half, I guess. He did not give a specific reason to his departure, and we're not in the business of speculation, and I haven't heard exactly why. But you said it was an honor of a lifetime. He thanked the NCAI executive committee, staff, tribal leaders throughout the country, for really working with him, and they put their best foot forward in the time he was there.
Wow, and it just seems like a year and a half has just flown by, because we met him at the annual convention, or actually I think a midterm convention in Nevada about a year and a half ago. So it's time has just flown by, and it's kind of strange in this pandemic. Did you talk anything about how the organization has continued to operate in this pandemic?
Yeah, one of the goals that he said that they've achieved in his time there was, acquiring financial stability for the organization. I didn't get a chance to listen to the finances report, but it seemed like they were in a good place. And like many organizations similar to us as well, they've been working remotely for a while now, and it took a while to adapt to. But business for Indian country doesn't stop, and so they didn't either.
All right. And then as far as the theme this year and the major issues that the organization is tackling at its annual convention, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the theme of the annual convention is truth and reconciliation. It's something that President Fawn Sharp mentioned in her opening remarks, and as well as something she called back to that she said during the State of Indian Nations address in February, I believe it was. She just kind of called it a new era in federal Indian policy, and recently wrote an op-ed that was published online, kind of calling for a truth and reconciliation commission that would kind of look into what really happened, and coming to terms with what happened to the natives in the past.
And so really understanding what's happened in historically, and then where we are today. One thing that President-elect Biden has mentioned is that he will reinstate the White House Tribal Leaders meeting, that annual convention of tribal leaders. Was there any talk about that in any of the sessions?
No, not that I heard. I believe yesterday was just a General Assembly, but I imagine that it is some talk among some tribal leaders. I know that Tribal Leaders Summit that was hosted during the Obama years was a highlight, and it's good to have that reinstated for sure.
All right, and then one thing the NCAI did quite a bit in this last year was, as they always do in an election year, they looked at registering Native Americans. They had to get out the native vote effort, and is that on the agenda for this convention, and looking at how they mobilize the native vote and what these next 4 years could mean to Indian country?
Yeah, I believe there is an update on their efforts, as well as what they did to get Native people to fill out the census, as well as COVID-19 economic recovery. They have a pretty robust agenda planned for the week.
And Colby, is there any word on the Biden transition team and looking at Native Americans to potentially appoint to any position in this new administration?
So the Biden transition team is, I believe it's been announced and kind of formed. I know they've seen some calls on social media to have some sort of Native representation in the cabinet. I've seen certain people call for Representative Deb Haaland to be Secretary of the Interior. There are certainly positions where there are more than qualified people to be in the cabinet, and we hope to see it.
And so we're looking at something like that. And you covered two candidates who were not successful in their election races. But what does their run for these offices mean? And tell us a little bit about the two candidates.
Yeah, so I profiled Rudy Soto, who is running for the U.S. House Representative seats in Idaho, as well as Paulette Jordan in the same state, although she was running for Senate. Paulette has been in politics for a while now, so I don't imagine that she's going anywhere. Whatever her next steps will be, it will be, I imagine, in Indian country, and she'll make an impact. Rudy, he's still young, and a great guy, and wish him nothing but the best for whatever his next steps are as well.
And again, just the fact that they made it to the general election speaks volumes to the change in the voter ideas there in Idaho, because Again, 2 Native Americans running for office there, when 10 years ago it wasn't the case. But if you go further back in Idaho's history, you had Jeannie Givens, who ran for office from there as well, and she actually served in the state house.
Yeah, for historically, conservative state, it's awesome just to even get to that level. I believe when I was doing my research for Paulette, they haven't had a Democratic senator since I think like 1981 or earlier. So it has been a long time.
Well, so much going on, and we're still seeing the impact of the Native vote in this election, and then again looking at how that can translate into the face of the new administration as the changeover takes place here. So, what's next on your work table there, Colby?
Well, I'm keeping an eye on NCI's convention this week to see if any more big news breaks, and as well as election follow-ups throughout Indian country.
All right, thank you so much, Colby Kicking Woman.
Appreciate it, Patty. Take care.
And that will do it for this edition of Indian Country Today. And on this eve of Veterans Day, we want to send our thanks to all veterans for your service. Take care of yourselves. Your life is precious. I'm Patty Tawahungva. Join us again tomorrow.
You got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
Indian Country Today is recorded at the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center in Phoenix, Arizona.
This is Indian Country Today.